The following recording was done in the very early 1980s, and it was an interview of John S. Knox Jr. of Atlanta by his grandson Knox Hurst on the topic of the 1930s in Atlanta.
Those were the only theaters in Atlanta?
Well, not actually. The vaudeville was still very much going, and the silent movies were still in Atlanta when I was real young, and I can remember very well going to the Capitol Theater in Atlanta to silent movies when I couldn't read, and the subtitles were under the pictures, and my mother would read to me as the picture was going along, so we would know so that I would know what was going on. And they would always have a piano player up there in the front playing to go along with the movie. And that was in the times of vaudeville, and when the movie was over, the vaudeville would come on. And I think most of the people went there just to see the vaudeville. And then somewhat later, when the silent movies went away, they just had vaudeville at the Capitol. And this was pretty neat. I guess I was in about the 6th grade. The World's Fair in Chicago was in 1933, and the star of that was Sally Rand, who had no clothes on whatsoever, and she danced with a big old bubble. She was the bubble dancer, and that was the big star of the 1933 World's Fair. So in about 1934, 5 or 6, or somewhere right in there, she came to Atlanta, and for about a week, and all of us kids would go down and take the streetcar downtown, go to the capital city, to the Capitol Theater to see Sally Rand. And we took pea shooters down there and tried to break the bubble with the pea shooters. And we got thrown out of there on 3 separate occasions for that week that Sally Rand was playing at the Capitol Theater.
Could you tell me a little bit about transportation in the 1930s?
Well, of course, I was in grammar school in the 30s, and all I can tell you is from my perspective then. Our lifeline was streetcars. There were streetcars that came from downtown Atlanta and went. They stopped. There was one that stopped at 19th Street or Pershing Point. Another one went to Buckhead, and another one went all the way to Overflow. And the streetcar tracks ran right down the middle of the street. And they didn't turn around. When they got to the end of the line, the motorman just took off his handle that he drove the thing by and carried it to the other end of the streetcar and hooked it up and pulled the trolley down from one end and hooked it up from the other end, just reversed the trolleys and went on back. And a lot of times we would hide in the bushes, and when the trolley would come around Peachtree, right where the Cathedral of St. Philip's is now, we would run out and pull the trolley off and run as fast as we could, and the trolley man would have to come back and put it on. Another thing that we would do to give them a lot of trouble was when the trolley was riding down Peachtree, we would sit in the driver's seat as if it was going the other way. We would sit in the back end of the trolley, and when they had a little lever there that put sand on the track because the wheels would spin sometimes, and we would press that lever and pour sand all over the track. And the guy would run back to get us, and we would jump out the back and run on that. It cost 10 cents to ride the trolley, but kids got to ride for what's called a school token. It cost a nickel, and we all had school tokens, and we would give them the school tokens, and that would ride. But when I was living on Peachtree and going to Erie Rivers, I always walked to school. I walked about, you're not going to hear an old story like the walk 10 miles in the snow. I walked about a quarter of a mile, and it wasn't in the snow, it was all downhill. but that's the way the public transportation went. Private transportation, of course, at that time was mostly automobiles. We had a Graham Page, I remember that. It was a great car. While horses and everything had gone out, it was still not an unusual sight. In other words, not an unusual sight to see wagons and other things come by, which they did quite frequently on Peachtree. The milkman came in a wagon and so forth. Also, they had Ku Klux Klan marches, and Buckhead was the headquarters. Well, actually, next door to our house was, for about a year, the headquarters of the National Ku Klux Klan, which they had a underground tunnel. It was really a ditch that they had built and covered over with boards and put dirt on top of that so they could get back to the swamp, which was back of us. And they built, or rather they made all of the uniforms of the Ku Klux Klan in a building that still stands on Roswell Road at Buckhead near Billy's. Stands right there. It's a 3-story building, and they manufactured all of the Ku Klux Klan uniforms for the United States every year. I'll never forget a huge march of the Klan from Buckhead to 5 Points. There must have been at least 6,000 or 7,000 people, all in Ku Klux Klan uniforms, marching from Buckhead to 5 Points.
Could you tell me a little bit about what it was like for you to grow up on Peachtree Road in the 1930s?
Well, I've told you a little bit about it. It was pretty much wild between Peachtree and Northside and Howell Road. I remember one time we caught a wildcat, a bobtail wildcat, right in the backyard in an oversized rabbit trap. There were a bunch of wild dogs that ran around where Bobby Jones Golf Course is now. And the sewage disposal for the city of Atlanta was where the tennis courts at Bitsy Grant over at Bobby Jones is now. And we could look out our back window and see the big spray come up every 15 minutes there at Bobby Jones Golf Course at Bitsy Grant. I remember the ice storm that we had. I think it was in 1935, which was really devastating. It knocked out all of the electricity and trees and everything. We didn't have electricity for about 10 days or 2 weeks, and it was very difficult at that time.
Could you tell me a little bit more about transportation in the 1930s?
Well, I've told you about how we got up and down Peachtree Road. A lot of hitchhiking then, and you could hop on a wagon or hop on somebody's truck. And, there was no question about crime. Nobody locked their door. We didn't have a key to the front door of our house, which was right there on Peachtree Road, and never had any fear or any crime whatsoever. Transportation mainly between cities was by train. Air was just coming along. I remember Carolyn Miller of Baxley, Georgia, who wrote Lamb in Her Bosom and was a real outstanding novel in the 1930s, and I believe it received all kinds of prizes, and is still mentioned from time to time. She came into Atlanta and she flew in on Eastern on a Condor plane, which was at a high wing and a low wing, and Sunday afternoon. And I would beg my uncles and my father and everybody to take me to Candler Field to fly in a plane. I remember going out there on Sundays and paying $2, and they would send me up in a World War I biplane, and the pilots then were very dashing fellows around town called Beaver Blivens and Doug Davis, both of whom later died in crashes around Atlanta. And I would fly in an open cockpit plane with them, with tail draggers. It didn't have tail wheels, and Candler Field was nothing but the thick dust. And when we went up there, when you went out there, the motors of the airplane created tremendous amount of dust. And later on, they got the Ford Trimotor there. I remember flying a Ford Trimotor out there. We would go up and fly all around Atlanta in a Ford Trimotor, which held about maybe 7 or 8 people.
Could you tell me a little bit about the build-up of World War II in the late 30s?
Well, I was probably more attuned to it than most people my age, but I can remember vividly reading about the build-up of Hitler and the invasion of Austria and Czechoslovakia and all of that. But I was getting a little bit older at that time, and I had a shortwave radio, as a matter of fact, and I would listen to Germany, and I could get it very clear, and I'd turn it up loud. And this was after World War II started, and I could, I had heard the list of Canadians and Americans who were shot down. And one particular time I was listening, it said Lieutenant so-and-so and so-and-so was shot down and captured, and he resided at 2300 and something Peachtree Road. And I shut off the radio immediately and got on my bicycle and went and told his mother and father. That was the first news that they had, that their son was shot down in Germany.
I'd like to thank you a lot for sharing this information with us, and if you have any closing comments about the 30s, could you please do?
Well, the 30s, looking back on it from the time of the real affluence that we had after World War II, they were really a time of deprivation for many, many people. And a lot of people that had money lost everything they had. What really brought the country out of the Depression was World War II. None of Roosevelt's programs or anything really did much. We had a little bit of recovery in 1937, but until the war production started long before Pearl Harbor, and the building of the Bell Bomber plant in Marietta, which is, of course, now Lockheed, there was still a lot of the Depression thoughts and thinking in people's minds. I could go on talking about many, many aspects